Yo soy chicano, tengo color, puro chicano, hermano con honor. Cuando me dicen que hay revolución, defiendo a mi raza con mucho valor. Tengo todita mi...
My name is Rosa, and this is Independence and Identity, the Chicano Movement, prepared as part of the class Intro to Chicanx Latinx Histories, History 17CH at the Claremont Colleges. The Chicano movement was in full force in the 1960s and early 1970s. It was clearly inspired by the likes of the Black Power movement and the Civil Rights movement. The movement's exact origin is hard to say with certainty, but it is known that many Mexican-American youth were influenced by the farm worker struggle led by Cesar Chavez and Reyes López Tijerina when he sought to reclaim land grants in New Mexico for Hispanos. Let's start by taking a look at a piece from the Los Angeles Times written by Ruben Salazar called Anglo Integration Rejected by Chicanos. This was written on April 7, 1969, after the Chicano Youth Liberation Conference in Denver, Colorado. This conference was the first major Chicano event to host Chicanos from all over the U.S. Before we look at this piece too much further, let's take some time to understand the author, Ruben Salazar. Salazar was a Mexican-American journalist, born in Ciudad Juarez and raised in El Paso, Texas. His work on the Chicano movement is unique in that he sought to be impartial. Although he did not identify as Chicano, perhaps his Mexican-American background helped him to see the Chicano movement with an open mind and understand their frustrations enough to communicate them with white Americans and other Mexican Americans who did not identify as Chicanos. Salazar begins with a pretty bold statement. The ethnic nationalism talk-in helped explain the frustrations of many politically and socially conscious Mexican Americans. They don't want to be accepted or integrated by the Anglo. They want to be recognized as an important indigenous part of the Southwest. Here, Salazar points out both a context and a goal for the labeled Mexican American population. We can gather that there have been immense frustrations, and as a result, this population has rejected integration. So, what does this mean, and what does this look like? Well, Mexican Americans in the 60s had yet to be considered in any legal sense as racially different from white Americans. This, however, did not stop them from being discriminated against on the basis that they were Mexican. At the time, Mexicans in the U.S. largely consisted of the working class, historically seen as only useful for agricultural labor. They were first put in different schools, and even when integrated, were the victims of discrimination and prejudice. They were treated as lesser than, bound to fewer opportunities because of their heritage. To act as though they were given the same opportunities or were treated in the same way as white Americans couldn't be further from their reality. It was these kinds of frustrations that led to the rejection of a white identity and the eventual development and rise of the Chicano movement. It's not surprising that some Mexican Americans no longer believed that it would be possible to integrate into a white-dominant U.S. The Chicano movement in many ways was a rejection of a history of assimilation and imperialism that had sacrificed indigenous identity. It was a celebration of this indigenous identity that could more accurately reflect the identity of a working class with a rich culture. Salazar then quotes the spiritual plan of Aztlan, which declared, "Spiritual independence of our mestizo, Indian Spanish blood nation. We are the bronze race with a bronze culture." The spiritual plan of Aztlan was a way to reject a white identity, acknowledge and celebrate a history inclusive of its indigenous identity, and declare unity through ethnic nationalism. The historical residence of Mexicans in current U.S. allowed for an ethnic history that occurred between borders. This residence can be traced to when much of the U.S. actually belonged to Mexico, and the migration of Mexicans to the U.S. when encouraged by the Bracero program to come to the U.S. for farm labor. This transnational history allowed for the creation of an ethnic nationality that united a population under a common ethnic history. The spiritual plan of Aztlan defines an imagination related to the Aztec myth of origin being the southwestern portion of the U.S. It describes the southwestern portion of the U.S. as the birthplace of Chicanos. Salazar further states, in calling for a revolution, the statement says that, to us, nationalism is an awareness that we are not Caucasian, not Mexican American, or any label the system puts upon us, but that we are a people with an ancient heritage and an ancient scar on our souls. Ethnic nationalism allowed for a new identity, a Chicano identity. The spiritual plan of Aztlan gave Chicanos a mechanism for unification, a common newfound identity, as well as a history in place to validate this identity. The Chicano movement would use this newfound identity to motivate its action. Leaders like Corky Gonzalez with his poem I Am Joaquin would seek to tap into shared Chicano experiences to motivate the youth's demand for equal treatment for Chicanos. Examples of these demands include the statements of, "We Chicanos were here first. We speak Spanish, which should be an advantage, and let's help each other." In unity and with power, Chicano youth sought a better way of living. The Chicano identity unified a young Mexican American population, rejected assimilation through independence, and protested injustice.